Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. I want to ask each of you, what do you wish you had said on last week's show, but you didn't? Chris?
Well, we talked about the special session, and I was making the point that the legislature or some legislative leaders, especially Representative Lewis, were sort of crowing after the session, complaining about Governor Cooper's veto, saying he didn't want any competition. He didn't want the voters to have more choices on the ballot. And I pointed out that the General Assembly exempted itself when they lowered the threshold. So I think that there's a lot of it may be not news to anybody, but the politics, every single thing now is partisan. There's a way to try to make political hay out of everything. I actually think lowering the threshold for all races is a really good idea. A lot of us on the left and the right have always thought that. And it's sad to me that we have a General Assembly that's taking credit for doing it when they exempted themselves.
Henry Hinton, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, we were talking about the bill to reform the judiciary, and I really believe, I know that what's going on right now in the discussion about the elimination of the primary next year, I know that's political, but I really want, if we can all start a campaign to try to reform the judiciary in the right way. I think that, you know, Peg talked about the commission that is charged with looking at the judiciary in the state of North Carolina on an ongoing basis, but they need a strategic plan. We've got some counties that have got judges that aren't needed. We've got population centers popping up, particularly in the western part of the state, places like where I live in Greenville, Wilmington, where we don't have enough judges. And there needs to be a strategic plan put in place for how we're going to elect or select judges and how they're going to be placed in the population.
But wouldn't you agree that doesn't need to be done in a special session? It deserves hearings and it deserves deliberation.
I'm not even sure it needs to be done by the legislature. You know, maybe a special blue ribbon panel or somebody.
Like the Courts Commission.
If you could ever.
Good luck with that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think what the legislature wants to do is appoint everybody, including the district attorneys. I think that's where we're headed down the road. But I'm just concerned about the fact that the population shifts in the state of North Carolina have created so much pressure on judges and the judicial system that it's not effective.
Few disagree that we need this redistricting. They just don't like the way it's been handled.
Correct.
At this point.
Yeah.
Peg O'Connell, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, two things, if I can, Tom. First was I'm absolutely delighted to be back on the air with Henry Hinton, so that's the first thing I wish I'd said, first thing out of my mouth. This other thing I wanted to say is
There's a lot of love in this room.
Yeah, a lot of love.
Where are we going with
is
this?
a bit of outrage. Not an hour after the mass shootings were reported on the news on the East Coast in the morning, Representative Mark Meadows when they asked him, what shall we do? He said, I don't know, but more laws are not the answer. Well, what I want him to tell me is what is the answer? What are we going to do? What is he going to say to the families of those people and the families of the people in Sandy Hook?
We know what the answers aren't.
Yes.
We just need to know what they are. John Hood, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, we had a brief exchange about the Second Amendment and the militia, and I was trying to explain in a short period of time what the original purpose of the Second Amendment was. Again, not my theory. This is pretty well established at this point. One of the things to understand about the militia as a term is that it did basically it was a draft system, it was a conscription system, and all the males who were citizens in the area were required to provide militia service. During the Revolutionary War, a lot of them showed up with their hunting and fowling weapons, in other words, rifles and shotguns. These are not particularly useful for military use. Took too long to load a rifle, shotgun had too short a range, didn't have enough stopping power. So a lot of them didn't have muskets. This was really the Second Amendment was about ensuring that individuals would have muskets, they would own muskets. You don't really use them for hunting, you don't really use them for anything other than protecting yourself or maybe serving in the militia. In other words, this is quite literally not a constitutional protection of hunting rights or something. That's not what it was about. It really was about using shoulder arms. Now, we can amend the Constitution if we like, but we don't get to invent different meanings of the Constitution because we don't like it anymore. That's what it was for. It was in state constitutions in similar language, and it is a constitutionally protected right. It isn't just a convenience.
Interesting. Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.